A 6 Elixir cannon. That's not a joke. It was real, and for a brief moment, it nearly broke Clash Royale. Today, cannon is one of the most reliable buildings in the game. Cheap, efficient, and with evolution, well, it's everywhere. But back then, it was something else. Why did it cost double, and more importantly, why was it worth it? This is the insane story of a building that entered the game already broken, nearly got killed off by Supercell, and then came back stronger than ever, only to break the game once again. This is the full history of the cannon, a card built for defense, but remembered for destruction. Before it was holding the line against Hog Riders in Clash Royale, the cannon had already earned its place in Clash history. In Clash of Clans, the cannon is the first defense you unlock. No splash, no gimmicks, just a simple turret that fires at ground troops. That's it. No special targeting, no flashy effects, just cannonballs flying through the air. And honestly, that's kind of what made it iconic. The cannon didn't need complexity. It was your first defense, your first sense of safety, and your first real taste of how base building worked in the game. It was as straightforward as it gets. It's a cannon. You know, what else could it possibly do? So when Clash Royale entered development, bringing in Clash of Clans' most iconic defense made perfect sense. The cannon, alongside cards like the Inferno Tower, Expo, and Mortar, felt like natural fits for a game built around defense, timing, and positioning. But Royale was faster, matches were tighter, Elixir was precious. In this new chaotic battlefield, the cannon had to prove it could keep up. And that's where things got a bit weird, because early on, cannon wasn't just another cheap defense card. It was massive, and some say it cost 6 Elixir. Before Clash Royale had champions, seasons, or even a global player base, it had the beta, a short, chaotic testing phase limited to a few countries. This was 2016, and the game was still trying to figure out what it even wanted to be, and nowhere was that confusion more obvious than in the buildings, specifically the cannon. In today's game, the cannon is known as a humble 3 Elixir card, cheap, disposable, effective, but back in the beta, well, the cannon cost 6 Elixir. It was a giant, overbuilt monster with more health, more lifetime, a faster hit speed, and larger range than it has today. It didn't just defend, it shut down entire pushes. Hog Riders were vaporized, giants melted in front of it, and it stuck around forever. It had a lifetime of 60 seconds, meaning that you didn't have to time it at all really, as 60 seconds was basically a third of the match. It had more than double the hit points, allowing it to soak up a bunch of damage from both the win conditions as well as support troops behind it, but maybe the craziest thing of all was its absurd range of 7 tiles. This meant that it could outrange musketeers and wizards. But really quick, before we move on, this is a bit of a long video and these take a lot of work, so I'm going to ask you to subscribe early to the channel on this one and maybe like this video if you are enjoying it. These videos really take forever to make, and your support means the world to me. I genuinely appreciate it. So the cannon was a big, beefy, well, you know, cannon that was extremely hard to counter. There was no earthquake yet, there was no miner, no goblin drill, graveyard, or anything that could bypass the cannon. It was incredibly hard to destroy and then deal damage to the Princess Tower afterward. But here's the thing, this wasn't some wild bug or overpowered mistake. In beta, this was normal. Cannon wasn't the only card bloated with stats. Mortar cost 6 Elixir too, with huge damage. Bomb Tower, that's 6 Elixir, and hit like a truck. It wasn't just the cannon that felt tanky and overbearing. Every defensive building was treated like a major investment. And I'm sure you're asking why, but that's because the developers weren't exactly sure how to implement buildings yet. Clash Royale was being built from the skeleton of Clash of Clans, where defensive structures are the core of the game. You build a base, fill it with turrets and traps, and wait to be attacked. Defense is everything. But Clash Royale flipped that formula on its head. It was real-time, player versus player, and moment-to-moment gameplay. And suddenly buildings weren't static parts of the layout. They were dynamic tools you had to place reactively. with tight timing and limited resources. So in those early beta days, the design team was experimenting, trying to find that line between defensive control and game-breaking stall. The result? Well, cards like the cannon were absurdly strong, but absurdly slow. You had to commit a lot of elixir for them, and in return, they gave you lockdown value, sometimes too much. Entire matches could devolve into long, drawn-out standoffs. One player drops a cannon, the other answers with a bomb tower, then both sit back and collect elixir. It wasn't rare for games to hit overtime with barely a scratch on either tower, and Supercell, they weren't a fan of it. From the very beginning, Supercell has been vocal about one single design philosophy. Clash Royale should reward offense. Games should be fast, aggressive, and focused on smart timing and pressure, not just sitting back and placing buildings. They didn't want Royale to become a who defends better simulator. They wanted it to feel like a battle, one where proactive players could break through and win. And the beta building meta went completely against that. Cannon, mortar, bomb tower, they were too slow to feel interactive, too beefy to counter efficiently, and too centralizing to allow for creative plays. Worst of all, they made matches feel, well, boring. You have to remember, there was no Elixir Golem, no Electro Giant, Firecracker. Cards were simple and options were limited. When a cannon dropped, it defined the field for about 60 whole seconds. And unless you had a very specific answer, you were forced to play around it or stall until it finally crumbled. So in the months leading up to the global launch, Supercell started to dial things back. Mortar was reworked to cost just 4 elixir and had its range reduced and its damage nearly cut in half, and the cannon, it dropped to 3 elixir. It had its range decreased to 6 tiles, its lifetime decreased to 40 seconds, and its hit points nerfed by 55%. It wasn't about nerfing buildings out of existence, it was about giving them a clear role and reshaping the way Clash Royale would be played. In this new version of Clash Royale, the cannon would be the cheap, quick fix solution. Drop it, stall a hog, cycle fast, get back to offense. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't threatening, but it gave you just enough control to survive. And honestly, that fits the cannon perfectly. After all, it was never supposed to carry your deck. Just like in Clash of Clans, its job was simple: defend, delay, hold the line. But that simplicity came at the end of a wild experimental phase. One where a 6 elixir cannon stood tall and nearly broke the game before it even launched. So when the first month of beta had passed, the cannon was no longer meant to anchor a push or stall the entire match. It was now a quick disposable building, perfect for cycle decks. Fast forward a few weeks and we arrive at March 3rd. Clash Royale had just globally launched the day prior, but the cannon and a few other key buildings were already under the developer's microscope. A new balance patch hit, and this time it wasn't just about the cannon. It was a targeted strike against the defensive backbone of early Clash Royale. Cannon had its lifetime reduced from 40 to 30 seconds, shaving off a full quarter of its presence on the field. Tesla had its hit speed slowed from 0.7 to 0.8 seconds, and its lifetime cut from 60 to 40 seconds, and even the Expo, one of the most controversial cards from the very start, had its range reduced from 13 to 12 tiles, finally giving opponents a better chance to take it down. These were all pure buffs, and they weren't subtle. Supercell had a message: overpowered defenses are killing the pace of the game. Early Clash Royale wasn't as aggressive or polished as it is today. Matches could drag out. Players would camp behind cheap, long-lasting buildings, stalling pushes and creating slow, grindy gameplay. These changes, especially to building lifetime, were designed to speed things up, reduce downtime, and make sure defensive players couldn't just sit back and wait. Cannon was still only 3 elixir, but it could no longer anchor the board for as long. You had to time it better, place it smarter, and actually think about your defense. Clash Royale was growing up fast, and the era of overly passive play was on the chopping block. With Clash Royale officially launched and its first few balance patches rolling in, the game began to evolve rapidly. Players were testing the limits of every win condition, trying to crack the code of what made a deck consistently powerful. And in the midst of all that chaos, one archetype quietly started to form. Not through brute strength or flashy interactions, but through precision, efficiency, and elixir. Enter the Hog Trifecta. Before the term Hog 2.6 was even a whisper in the community, the foundation for one of Clash Royale's most iconic deck archetypes was already being laid. It wasn't fully optimized yet, but its pieces were falling into place. Players started running a deck built around Hog Rider, Musketeer, Skeletons, Elixir Collector, Poison, Zap, Valkyrie, and of course, the Cannon. It might not sound groundbreaking now, but back then, this was the birth of a brand new style of Clash Royale gameplay. One that didn't rely on overwhelming force, but instead on timing, placement, and pure elixir management. It was something different, and Cannon was right at the heart of it. This deck introduced a unique strategy that the game hadn't fully seen before: cycle-based control. The idea was simple on the surface: defend efficiently, then punish with Hog Rider when your opponent was out of position. But under the hood, this deck was a finely tuned machine. The Cannon, for just 3 elixir, became your first line of defense. It didn't target air, it didn't spawn anything, and it didn't need to. Its entire purpose was to pull win conditions, especially Hog Riders and Giants, and get positive elixir trades. At the time, the only other real competitor in its slot was Tombstone, a spawner that was far more fragile. It was the only other building costing 3 elixir, but a giant could crush it in just a couple hits, and even if it spawned skeletons, a simple zap could erase that threat entirely. Cannon, on the other hand, could actually stand up to hits, stall units in the middle of the arena, and survive long enough to support a counterattack. It became the perfect cheap defensive building, reliable, fast, and just sturdy enough to buy time for your Musketeer or Valkyrie to clean up. The core trio, Musketeer, Valkyrie, and Cannon, created a defensive fortress. Each one covered the other's weaknesses. Cannon pulled tanks and Hog Riders. Valkyrie shut down swarms and anything melee, and the Musketeer deleted air units and stayed safely behind the lines. Meanwhile, Skeletons and Zap added cheap cycle value. Skeletons could pull mini-tanks like Mini P.E.K.K.A. or Knight, and even distract a charging Prince if timed right. Zap cleaned up leftover troops, counter Goblin Barrels, or reset Inferno Towers, you name it, it had a lot of value. All this defense existed for one singular goal: set up your next hog push before your opponent could reset. And this is where the Elixir Collector came in. At the time, Elixir Collector cost just 5 elixir, and it wasn't a greedy play. It was part of the deck's engine. Dropping a collector behind your King Tower wasn't about building a massive beatdown push. It was about guaranteeing you would win the long game. More elixir meant more Hog Riders, more defenses, more chances to outcycle your opponent's key counters. You didn't need to overwhelm your opponent with one massive push. The goal was to chip away with fast, efficient attacks. Maybe you opened up with a Valkyrie to clear swarms, then pushed with Hog plus Poison if your opponent ran minions or barbarians. Maybe you just sent Hog plus Musketeer and held your Poison to defend their counterattack. Either way, you were dictating the pace. The Cannon, with its low cost and solid performance, gave you the freedom to spend your elixir elsewhere. What made this deck so scary wasn't that it was unbeatable, it was that it felt endlessly reliable. Against beatdown decks, you had answers. Against swarms, you had answers. And if the opponent tried to outcycle you, you could just do it better. Poison at the time was especially strong, slowing down movement and attack speed while dealing reliable damage over time and completely denying swarmy defenses. Combined with a well-placed cannon and a backline musketeer, most pushes fell apart before they could even touch your tower. It wasn't quite like the 2.6 we know today, considering the Log and Ice Spirit weren't in this version, but this was the blueprint. The earliest proof that in Clash Royale, speed and control could be just as dangerous as brute force. And no other building could be as cost-effective as the cannon. By early of May 2016, Clash Royale was still finding its footing. The meta was evolving rapidly, and the dev team was paying close attention to balance, eager to keep the game fresh and, most importantly, fast. Defensive buildings like Cannon, Tesla, and Bomb Tower had carved out their niche as reliable counters to a variety of decks, while the Elixir Collector was a backbone of many control and cycle decks. At the same time, the Royal Giant, a card that had long been underwhelming, was about to get a game-changing boost. On May 3rd, 2016, Supercell pushed out a balance update that targeted a handful of key cards, all aimed at dialing in the pace and balance of Clash Royale's gameplay. The cannon took a modest 11% hit to its hit points, making it slightly less durable. This wasn't a crippling nerf by any means. Cannon was still the go-to cheap defensive building, the reliable rock that could pull tanks and stall enemy units for cards like Musketeer or Valkyrie to clean up. This nerf seemed designed to nudge players away from Cannon's dominance by opening the door a little wider for other buildings to shine. Tesla and Inferno Tower, often overshadowed by Cannon's reliability, benefited from this slight weakening. The game was signaling that defense shouldn't revolve around just one building. Instead, players could explore varied strategies, with Tesla's rapid fire or Inferno's scaling damage. Mortar's deployment time was increased from 3 to 5 seconds, and its damage dropped by 10%. This change slowed down the siege pace, making Mortar pretty much useless. Bomb Tower saw its lifetime drop from 60 to 40 seconds, meaning it wouldn't stick around as long to soak up damage or chip away at pushes. These tweaks weren't the main focus of the patch, but contributed to the overall goal of reducing lingering defensive buildings cluttering the arena. The Elixir Collector lost 20% of its hit points, a substantial but fair adjustment. This change made the Elixir Collector a bit easier to fireball or lightning down, ensuring it wasn't an impenetrable fortress. For cycle decks like the emerging Hog Trifecta, this simply meant enemy pushes could take it down with spells a bit easier. Still, the Collector remained a key piece of getting ahead in the Elixir economy. Its benefits far outweighed the risk, and this tweak didn't derail the cycle strategy, but rather balanced it. Perhaps one of the more nuanced changes was the Valkyrie becoming affected by pushback from spells like Fireball or Rocket. Before this patch, Valkyrie's position was rock solid. She'd spin through swarms and tanks alike, almost impervious to being shoved around by spells. After the update, Valkyrie could be knocked back slightly, interrupting her spin and making her a little bit easier to deal with. This didn't make her useless. Far from it, Valkyrie was still a powerful swarm clearer and solid defender. But this new vulnerability gave opponents a small window of opportunity to outplay or chip away at her with well-timed spells, balancing her dominance without killing her role. But the most dramatic change of the patch was by far the Royal Giant's range increase by 1 tile. A seemingly small buff, but one that shook the meta. Before this, Royal Giant was underpowered compared to other tanks and win conditions. At 6 Elixir, he had less hit points and dealt less damage than the normal 5 Elixir Giant. His only advantage was that he had a ranged attack. But with a shorter range than most defensive buildings, he struggled to reliably target enemy towers without getting quickly pulled or destroyed. With this buff, Royal Giant's attack range finally outranged all major defensive buildings, including Cannon, Bomb Tower, and Inferno Tower. This meant that it could safely start hitting the tower from outside the range of counters, making him incredibly frustrating to play against. Suddenly, players had to rethink their defensive lineups. Buildings like Cannon, once trusted to pull and stall tanks, could no longer do their job safely. Royal Giant's buff set the stage for him becoming a meta force and forever changed how decks approached building defense. Considering the Tesla hides underground when there are no targets in range, it became the only building that could more reliably counter the Royal Giant. Of course, the other buildings could still work, but mistiming it slightly would result in the Royal Giant sniping it from afar. Taken together, these nerfs and buffs were about more than just individual cards. Supercell was nudging Clash Royale away from long, defensive stalemates toward a more dynamic and aggressive style. By making defensive buildings slightly less tanky or slower to deploy, and empowering offensive threats like the Royal Giant, the game encouraged faster cycles, more aggressive pushes, and fewer games defined by passive building defense. Cannon remained the cheapest and most reliable defensive building, but its slight nerf and Royal Giant's new threat ensured it wouldn't be the only answer anymore. Players had to adapt, diversify, and find new ways to balance offense and defense. By June of 2016, Clash Royale was evolving fast, with new cards arriving that would come to define the meta for months to come, and one deck, that being Hog 2.6, was quietly beginning to take shape. Though Cannon had been repeatedly nerfed in the first half of the year, losing hit points in May and June, it remained the unquestioned backbone of the deck's defense, a role no other building could fulfill while keeping the deck's elixir curve ultra low. That June, the game introduced 2 key cards, the Log and the Ice Spirit. These would prove pivotal in shaping 2.6's defensive and cycle-heavy playstyle. The Ice Spirit was immediately recognized as incredibly strong, a cheap 1 elixir troop capable of freezing enemies briefly, providing both offense and defense in a single unit. It was perfect for slowing down pushes, allowing the cannon and other defensive troops to finish off attackers. On the other hand, the log was initially considered weak. Its ground clearing knockback effect wasn't yet fully appreciated, and players found it less impactful compared to other spells that were available. Yet despite the log's early reception, it would soon become one of the defining cards of 2.6, adding a crucial layer of ground control, especially against swarms like goblins and skeleton army, and allowing for chip damage on towers. This chip damage was pretty crucial because 2.6 was all about constant pressure, cycling quickly through cards to keep opponents on their toes and chipping away at their towers little by little. Fast forward to September of 2016, the game received another game-changing addition, the Ice Golem. This card brought a new defensive tool that fit perfectly into the 2.6 archetype. The Ice Golem, costing just 2 elixir, was tanky enough to distract units and slow enemy pushes while exploding on death to deal some extra area damage. This provided an extra layer of defense and synergy with other cycle cards like Ice Spirit and the Log. The arrival of Ice Golem marked the first true renditions of Hog 2.6 taking form. Now players could cycle through their cards even faster with multiple low-cost troops and buildings ready to defend and counterattack efficiently. The cannon, despite its earlier HP nerfs, remained the central building for soaking damage and distracting heavy units like the Hog Rider and Giants. No other building could really match its combination of low cost, survivability, and reliable damage output. Through this period, the meta was still heavily influenced by the giant poison decks that had dominated the first half of the year. Those slower, heavier decks aimed to build massive pushes supported by the extremely powerful poison, which slowed down attack and movement speed back in the day. Giant poison also relied on the Elixir collector as it could make it easier for these players to build their big push. But then in October, both the poison, giant, and the Elixir collector took a huge blow. The Giant was met with a 5% hit point reduction, the Poison was stripped of its ability to slow down both movement and attack speed entirely, and lastly, the Elixir collector was nerfed to cost 6 elixir instead of 5. This meant that players couldn't rely on slow builds and had to find faster, more aggressive ways to pressure opponents. Even with all of these changes, Cannon's role remained steadfast. Its repeated HP nerfs, including the 5% and 8% drops earlier in the year, made it a bit less durable but never obsolete. The deck relied on Cannon as the only 3 elixir building that could soak damage effectively without hurting the deck's cycle speed. The other 3 elixir building options like the Tombstone didn't really offer the same reliability. Tombstone spawned skeletons but was fragile and could easily be zapped, making it far less dependable as the cornerstone of defense in 2.6. As 2016 moved into the final months of the year, Hog 2.6 continued to grow in popularity, fueled by the synergy of Cannon, Ice Spirit, Ice Golem, and the Log. This deck defined the idea of cycling quickly and outmaneuvering opponents, maintaining relentless pressure with Hog Rider while defending efficiently with the Cannon and cheap troops. Even after all of the nerfs, Cannon never left the 2.6 deck, and that says a lot. It had one job: defend well without slowing the cycle down. And no other building could do that as effectively. Tombstone, it was the only other 3 elixir building. But it couldn't match the Cannon's reliability. It crumbled too easily, and in a fast-paced deck like 2.6, that just wasn't good enough. What made the Cannon stick in this deck came down to it being the only 3 elixir building other than Tombstone. And the Ice Spirit, Ice Golem, and the Log all came into the game and gave 2.6 the extra tools it needed: cheap cycle, crowd control, and support. But Cannon was the glue holding that defense together. Other decks might have dropped Cannon when it got nerfed. 2.6 didn't, because no matter how much health it lost, there was no real replacement that kept the cycle intact. Cannon was built into the foundation of this deck. To quote Todd Howard, it just works. By the time June of 2017 rolled around, Clash Royale had seen tons of balance changes, new metas, and plenty of cards that came and went from competitive play. But through all of that, Cannon quietly stayed exactly where it was, right at the heart of Hog 2.6 cycle. Other buildings were constantly being swapped in and out of decks depending on what was popular. Tesla and Inferno Tower, for example, were fighting for a place in Logbait, one of the strongest control decks in the game. Inferno was better at melting tanks like Giant and Golem, while Tesla was more versatile and harder to spell out. Their usage bounced around constantly, but Cannon didn't need to fight for a spot. Sure, you'd occasionally see it in other decks, especially in mid-ladder or off-meta builds, but its place in 2.6, that was locked in. That deck had built an identity around its cheap cycle, efficient defense, and constant pressure. And Cannon was the only building that could truly support all of that without ruining the deck's rhythm. But if you really want to see just how powerful 2.6 Hog was back then, you gotta pay attention to one of the best players at that time, that being Sushi Pepe. This guy wasn't just playing well, he was dominating top ladder with Hog 2.6. And the best part, we actually have one of his games, uploaded by the YouTuber Ash, who was known for inviting elite players to showcase strategy on his channel. I want you to watch this gameplay closely, seriously, like pretend you're watching a grandmaster at work. Because, well, you are. You'll notice tons of small interactions that could be played better, tighter timing, smarter placements, cleaner defenses, and you'll also start to realize that cards back then worked very differently. The game felt slower, matchups were more grindy, and wins were often earned one elixir at a time. But here's the exciting part. Pay attention year by year, because this is just the beginning. The Hog 2.6 players, they're only gonna get smarter. They're going to adapt, survive, and thrive in every single meta, no matter what Supercell throws at them. Wait until 2020 and beyond. We'll be talking about the best players in the entire game, names that changed how Clash Royale was played forever. And the gameplay you're about to see, well, it's just a glimpse of what's coming. You have no idea how insane things are going to get.
Panic with his tombstone placement there. He didn't have it in time, so he was forced to play it right in front of his tower. So therefore, I got rid of his tombstone from his cycle, and I was able to get 2 hog hits, I believe. So you just gotta. That's why it's really important to keep in mind what cards your opponent is going to use against your hog rider and how much elixir they have to use against your hog in the first place.
And again, very, very nice defense here. You know, just doing a good job of using the Ice Golem to distract the Executioner, face it the other way, get the Giant sucked into the other lane with a cannon, and let the Musketeer kind of go to town. Even though he's playing Giant Lightning, he hasn't had a chance to actually pull it off yet.
Yeah, so that play right there was a situation, as I was talking about, where you wouldn't push with the Ice Golem, because I saw I had an opportunity to extend on my push with the Musketeer, but I just used my Ice Golem on defense. So I still thought it was worth it there to just go with the push anyway, because I knew that he didn't have a sufficient counter to deal with the Musketeer as well as the Hog Rider. So once again... Yeah, sorry.
No. So if you find yourself, you know, either even an elixir or you just defend, but you don't have much left, but you do have the hog up in the cycle, it's all about whether you know they have the counter or not, in terms of if you make it into a push or not?
Yeah, so let's say you're both like about to hit 4 elixir, and he just pushed it against you and you defended it, and you have a hog in cycle. I personally, if you don't have an elixir surplus, I wouldn't be going that aggressive with the hog rider, because if he has his tombstone in cycle or anything in that matter to deal with your hog, you're going to be even more down on elixir. So because they're going to be making a +1 elixir trade if they have their tombstone in cycle in that situation.
Mm-hmm. So here comes Executioner again. At this point, you know you have him. At this point, you know you just can cycle Fireball, but you're still playing smart, good defense first, which is good.
Yeah. So that cannon, I'm gonna agree that was kind of a bad cannon, but because I played that in conjunction, like I played that before I knew that he had played that lightning. It both happened at the same time, so I wanted to make sure my cannon and musketeer once again was spread out so that he couldn't hit both of them.
That gameplay wasn't bad, but let's be honest, it was far from perfect. You've probably noticed a few misplays, maybe some placements that felt off or defenses that could have been cleaner. And that's exactly the point, because from this moment on, it is only going to get better. The players get sharper, the mechanics get tighter, and the intensity, yeah, it's about to spike. And just as the meta was settling, Supercell dropped a surprise. The Cannon cart arrived. This new card introduced in June was a fresh take on the traditional cannon, but it worked completely differently. It started as a 5 elixir ground troop mounted on wheels, able to move across the arena and deal some decent damage. Once the wheels were destroyed, the cart would break down and become a stationary building, essentially turning into a normal cannon on the spot. Stat-wise, the building form of cannon cart was almost identical to the standard cannon. It had the same damage output, range, and hit points as the 3 elixir building version. But there was a key difference. Its building form only lasted 20 seconds.
Building form has a shorter lifetimer compared to other buildings. Untouched, it'll last exactly 20 seconds.
In other words, once the cart had broken and became a structure, it had a strict time limit before disappearing. The regular cannon, on the other hand, stuck around for 30 seconds, and it didn't require a full troop phase to get there. Also, while the burning form shared stats, they didn't look the same at all. The cannon cart had a more makeshift design built to visually reflect its hybrid nature, while the classic cannon remained its own simple, iconic structure. So with all of that in mind, cannon cart was not here to replace cannon, and it couldn't even if it tried. The 2.6 deck simply couldn't afford the extra 2 elixir cost, and it didn't benefit from the cart's troop phase at all. That phase added complexity and delayed the defensive role that cannon needed to fulfill. When you're playing 2.6, you need a building right now to deal with hog riders, giants, and royal giants. You don't have time for a moving unit to die before it becomes usable. It's simply unreliable. Not that anyone ever tried to use the cannon cart as a substitute for a building. It was more of a second life kind of thing than a building, really. Outside of 2.6, cannon cart was being tested in other decks, especially in bridge spam or hybrid beatdown decks, but it never really threatened cannon's identity. It was just a completely different card in practice. Cannon's stability stood out in an era where almost everything else was shifting. Even though it had been nerfed multiple times throughout 2016, it was still the only building that could provide reliable defense for only 3 elixir without slowing down a fast cycle deck. And since 2.6 was still seeing consistent use, cannon never really dropped off in relevance. While other defensive buildings were constantly being evaluated based on the current meta, cannon just existed. Steady, simple, reliable, it didn't really need to compete, it already had a home. Sometime after the middle of 2017, a quiet but powerful shift started happening in how players handled defense. The Tornado spell, a low-cost, flexible tool, had begun to change everything. While the cannon had always been the go-to for cheap reactive defense, Tornado introduced a new kind of control that traditional buildings couldn't match. With just 3 elixir, players could now pull troops like Hog Rider or Giant straight into their King Tower, activating it early and turning every future push into an easier defense. That kind of value was something no defensive building could really ever offer. And unlike all buildings, Tornado couldn't be destroyed. It didn't stick around like a structure, it simply did its job, reset targeting, pulling troops, and left you with a permanent defensive advantage in the form of an activated King Tower. Suddenly, a 3 elixir spell was doing what many 3, 4, or even 5 elixir buildings could only dream of doing, and with far fewer downsides. It's no wonder players were moving away from buildings like Cannon and Tombstone in favor of spells that offered more flexibility and little to no counterplay. Because why would you drop a building that could get lightninged or fireballed when you could tornado a hog into your King Tower and be set for the rest of the game? For a while, cannon and buildings in general faded out of the spotlight, but they didn't stay gone. Just a few months later, in August of 2017, cannon saw a surprising comeback. This wasn't due to a balance change or a new strategy, it was purely a meta shift. Bridge spam decks had started to take over. Centered around fast-paced pressure from cards like Battle Ram and Bandit, often backed by Night Witch or Electro Wizard, the Battle Ram in particular posed a unique problem. Tornado, which had become the answer to so many ground-based threats, didn't work well against it. It didn't stop the charge, didn't redirect it cleanly, and couldn't be relied on for consistent value. That's where cannon came back into play. Reliable, quick to deploy, and cheap, the cannon was one of the few cards that could consistently counter the Battle Ram without overcommitting. Its 3 elixir cost meant players could still respond to follow-up threats, and it could be placed last second to intercept the ram before it connected. For that brief moment in August, cannon jumped from near zero usage to around 6.5% in the top 200 ladder players, putting it right alongside Inferno Tower and Inferno Dragon in terms of usage. But the comeback was short-lived. By September, the meta shifted again and Cannon was once more pushed to the sidelines. The battle ramp fell off, and with it, so did Cannon's temporary spotlight. By April of 2018, Cannon's usage on top ladder began to climb yet again, but this time it wasn't a temporary spike. It was thanks to Hog 2.6, solidifying itself as one of the most consistent, skillful archetypes in Clash Royale, a deck built on fast cycles, precise defenses, and constant pressure. And by this point, it wasn't just the deck that was evolving, the players were, too. Enter Jack, the best Hog 2.6 player of 2018. While Sushi Pepe had paved the way, Jack took it to another level. He wasn't just winning, he was dominating top ladder. And this time, Ash brought him onto the channel to showcase exactly why 2.6 was more than just a cycle deck. In the right hands, it was completely deadly. As you watch this next gameplay, pay some close attention. Every placement is tighter, every prediction is sharper. It's subtle, but you'll feel it. The gameplay is getting better and better. This wasn't a fluke. Hog 2.6 was becoming unstoppable, but because the players did.
Wait for that Mega Knight. Here's the Mega Knight. We have everything clumped together. We know the opponent doesn't have a big spell in this deck, maybe the one weakness of this deck, so we're not going to be afraid to clump everything together there. There's the beautiful log, beautifully timed log. We take down the miner. The Musketeer is still alive. We distract that Inferno Dragon with skeletons, and we're able to cycle back to another Ice Golem again to defend against all those goblins heading in, and the opponent says GG. He knows this one's over. We get 2 swings to the Hog, take down that left tower.
Around this time, giant decks were dominating. Slow push strategies were once again at the top of the meta, and the Hog Rider was one of the best answers to that kind of playstyle. He didn't give you time to build up. He demanded a response every few seconds. And in a deck like 2.6, you were getting hit with Hog push after Hog push. Cannon fits perfectly into this approach. Its 3 elixir cost meant you could always get back to it in time for the next Hog Rider cycle. And despite being nerfed multiple times in the past, it still delivered reliable value against tanks like Giant and even mini tanks like Knight and Valkyrie. The Tornado spell still loomed large over the meta, and many players, including analysts like Woody, noted how it had, quote, sucked the life out of many traditional buildings. Why use a building when a single spell could do more, especially without risking a negative trade? But even in that landscape, the cannon proved its worth in the decks where cycle speed and elixir efficiency mattered more than raw defensive power. The decks that didn't have room for a 4 or 5 elixir tower, the decks that couldn't afford to stand out and defend, but needed to defend fast, cheap, and often. And so the cannon carved out a niche, not just surviving but thriving in a meta that had largely moved away from traditional buildings. As long as 2.6 was around, cannon would never really go away. And as we can hear Ash say, 2.6 has always been around, even when it's not in top ladder.
But he's proving that 2.6 is back. Did it really ever go anywhere though? It's back at top ladder, but it's always been still one of the most popular decks in the game since, the very beginning of Clash Royale.
And the comments are showing how relevant 2.6 Hog Cycle is as well, with this user saying the only time when 2.6 will die is when the game dies. In April of 2019, Clash Royale introduced a brand new win condition Punisher, Earthquake, a 3 elixir spell that felt like a natural counter to cannon. On paper, it looked like a nightmare matchup. Earthquake did massive damage to buildings over a few seconds, slowed troops caught in its radius, and most importantly, cost the exact same as cannon. This meant that players could drop Earthquake, erase a cannon, and still be even on elixir, or even ahead if they clipped something else like skeletons or a musketeer. It had everything it needed to be Cannon's worst enemy. But interestingly, Cannon didn't struggle as much as people expected. Sure, Earthquake could delete a cannon, but only if the opponent had one in the first place. And that is where Earthquake hit a wall. At the time, buildings weren't even that common in the meta. Tesla and Inferno Tower had fallen out of favor in many archetypes, and the Elixir Collector, which Earthquake could have destroyed, had already been nerfed into irrelevance long before. Outside of Hog Rider decks, very few players were still even running a central building. So Earthquake ended up being a very situational card in the right matchup, like going up against the cannon. It was a great value tool, but in a lot of matches, it just kind of felt like a dead card in your hand. If the opponent had no buildings, you were holding on to 3 elixir for nothing, and unlike Fireball or Poison, Earthquake didn't offer much against troops unless they were already standing still. Because of that, Earthquake remained a niche spell and saw play in specific decks like Hog Earthquake or Royal Hogs, but it didn't take over the meta the way some expected, and for Cannon, especially inside Hog 2.6, that's kinda actually a blessing. In July of 2019, the cannon gets a rework, which is more of a buff. Its hit speed would decrease, going from 0.8 seconds to a full 1 second, but its damage would get increased by 32%. This meant more damage overall and better damage against beefier units like Hog Rider and Giant. It also allowed the cannon cart to kill certain units in less hits overall. The slower hit speed did make it a bit less reliable when taking out swarms, but that was a fair trade-off for the damage increase. Later in September of this year, the cannon would get its 3rd star level, giving the cannon a pretty slick gold skin, reminiscent of the level 10 cannon from Clash of Clans. By 2020, Hog 2.6 had fully cemented itself as a well-known and established archetype. It was no longer just a popular ladder deck, it was recognized for its consistency, defensive efficiency, and ability to outcycle opponents. At the core of this deck was still the cannon, not because it was the strongest building overall, but because it was the only one that could fit the deck's low-cost, fast cycle structure. In March of 2020, the cannon received a 5% damage buff, slightly boosting its ability to deal with ground troops more efficiently. This change didn't really redefine the card, but it made it a bit more solid in its existing role. But while Cannon held its role in 2.6, something else happened in 2020. Not a balance change, not just a new meta, a new player arrived. And his name was Oyasu. He didn't just play Hog 2.6, he mastered it. In March of 2020, the exact same month Cannon received a damage buff, Oyasu started uploading gameplay to YouTube, and almost overnight, his videos were pulling hundreds of thousands, then millions of views. But why? Because the way he played 2.6 didn't even look human. His defense with just Cannon, Ice Spirit, Skellies, and Musketeer was absolutely flawless. 3 Mega Knights shut down, a 25 Elixir push gone, a full clan watching live. He didn't blink. He didn't just survive, he dominated, and we're not just talking casual matches. Oyasu reached #1 on top ladder multiple times, consistently beating the best players in the world, with one of the simplest decks ever made. I've been watching Clash Royale since 2016, and I'll say this right now. What Oyasu did with Cannon is some of the most intense defense I have ever seen. So seriously, grab a meal and sit back. We're about to relive the craziest Hog 2.6 plays ever recorded. And by the end of this, you'll understand why Oyasu didn't just play 2.6. He redefined what the Cannon was capable of. We just watched some of the most insane defenses ever played in Clash Royale history, and through all of them, one thing stayed constant: the cannon. Oyasu didn't just use it, he turned it into a symbol. In June of 2021, Cannon got another upgrade. Its hit speed was improved from 1 second to 0.9, allowing it to shoot faster and handle waves of units more reliably. This might seem like a small change, but in practice, that made a massive difference. Suddenly, Cannon became much stronger against swarmy conditions, especially Graveyard, which relied on overwhelming defenses with skeletons. Now, Cannon could clean up faster, hold the line more effectively, and give Hog players a real edge in matchups that previously felt shaky. It was a quiet buff, but a massive boost to Cannon's consistency in the meta. But the following year, 2022, it received a hit point nerf of 8%. This made it a little easier to remove with spells and slightly less durable overall. Still, none of this was enough to push Cannon out of 2.6 because really no other building could replace it. Its 3 elixir cost and ground targeting reliability were simply unmatched in a cycle deck that required speed and efficiency above all else. Cannon's stats changed over time, but its place in Hog 2.6 never did. And despite that 8% HP nerf in 2022, Cannon wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Throughout the entire year, it remained one of the most used buildings at the highest level of play. Because when you look at the 2022 Clash Royale World Championship, you'll see something undeniable. The best players in the world trusted Cannon over and over again. And now I kind of want you to see it for yourself. We're diving into the most intense matches of the year, featuring the greatest players Clash Royale had ever seen. First up, Muhammad Light versus KK, a matchup filled with tight cycles, perfect placements, and master-level predictions. Then we'll roll into Muhammad Light versus Samuel Basoto, a battle that shows just how much control a skilled player can squeeze out of a simple 3 elixir building. And finally, we're ending with an all-time classic, Mugi versus Morton. Trust me, this one is juicy, one of the most insane games of 2022. All right, let's kick it off. Muhammad Light versus KK.
Can he get a good breakthrough here? Queen working up high against the push. The miner plus poison doing some pretty significant damage. And it is Muhammad Light who now roars back into this game, but the pigs push on the right-hand side.
Cannon and roll delivery on defense. Earthquake coming down a little bit late, and those pigs are gone. Now at this point, Muhammad Light is in a pretty good situation. All he needs to do is have good defense, utilize his Queen 3-card cycle to get multiple poisons and miners down on the board as we head into triple elixir.
Pigs to the right-hand side. slowed down a little bit. Will delivery get there? It's a cannon to pick up. Log gets the cannon off the board. Guards plus delivery mitigates most of that, but damage done. Down under 900 HP right now is the right-hand side for Mohamed Light, and now Poison just ticks a bit on that Archer Queen, but more importantly, working on that left-hand tower.
What I really think is the big mistake here is the queen on the left side. I think you want to play on the right side, block up this lane, get your 3-card cycle rolling, and play as many miners and poisons as possible.
Miner Poison down. 708 is the mark he has to surpass right now. Archer Queen taken care of. Most of the pigs do go over to that cannon and then picked up. 546 on the right-hand side. EQ doing its job. Final 18 seconds.
Poison drops here. Those Ice Spirits are always catching those miners. Miner does get one shot. Pre-cannon once again. Are we going to see the push over? We do. Earthquake and Log come down. 8 seconds left.
Miner in. Pre-skeletons. Catch the Miner. Miner goes bye-bye. EQ gets it done. KK takes game number 1.
In a win and loss, Hog right on the left-hand side, Archer Queen plus Cannon over here. Another Tornado to the King. And check this out. Can we see a second hit? Look at that. A lot of damage, actually the most damage on the King Tower right now for Mo.
Lowest tower health there for Basoto is his King Tower, so gonna have to start innovating his defenses. Mohamed Light very happy to keep getting those Hogs on that King Tower. Now a drill must come out defensively. Earthquake cycle in.
I really like the fact that I really like how Mo decided to go for that pre-Earthquake there, realizing Sam does not have the ability to keep tornadoing these Hogs to the King.
Mohamed Light setting the line, cannon up high. Magic Archer goes to the Hog Rider. Now we'll see where this NATO goes. Decides not to pull the trigger as the right tower and the King Tower are the ones that Basoto's most concerned about. And a giant skeleton meet each other at the bridge.
I really like that block. Now the tower is able to focus on this Goblin Drill, but the Log comes out really early. And the second set of skeletons is doing its best. On the left here, Hog is able to get a nice shot there.
I like that Sam is trying to get units on the board to create counter pushes, but Mo is just not giving him an inch. And now another Hog Rider comes down, which means a NATO must come in. He goes back instead of the King, and the Hog still gets a shot. It gets a big shot, and the Earthquake cycle, 1340, 2116. Mo in control.
15 seconds left, huge counter push from Samuel. He needs to defend perfectly here. Log comes out at the perfect timing. Tornado is trying to get the Gold Knight or the March.
The cannon lines up.
The cannon is lined up.
The Magic Archer.
But it's not enough.
Not enough. Mohamed Light takes game number 1.
Morton was finally able to chip away a little bit with the Goblin Barrel. He outcycled the Log. He went for the Goblin Barrel while Mugi was focused on offense. Mugi thought he could do the Ice Spirit or Fire Spirit plus Skeletons combo, but he played the Goblin Barrel in the front. That's a huge play.
And he's late on the delivery. Another 3 stab from the Goblin Barrel, 2034 to 2150. Morton feeling himself. He goes, all right, I'm at 10. There's a rocket, and Mugi has to be feeling the pressure.
Bomb Tower and Dark Gob on the defense. Wow. There's no way these pigs are going to get through for much. Maybe one hit.
One little piggy snout. That's it.
That's it. But the rocket is so valuable in a situation like this. Earthquake is not enough to keep up with something like that.
Morton goes slightly tricky on that barrel to the back instead of the front.
I really like the idea to play the Arch Queen in the back here, get that 3-card cycle activated, and you need to be spamming pigs and outcycle that Bomb Tower. This is your moment.
And I just don't know how he's going to beat this cycle. Morton is so on top of it. The Ice Spirit, I believe, still allowed the Fire Spirit to connect.
It did.
14-13, 11-42, 85 seconds.
Check out, he used this pigs. No, the pigs did not keep the Arch Queen alive. Can he break through this Bomb Tower right now?
Goblin gets his stab. Piggy's in the lane. Snowball comes down with the Earthquake, 1251, 902. Morton is a couple rockets and a log away, or Snowball, excuse me.
Skeletons do pick up the Dark Goblin. He's trying to defend.
Dark Goblin's on the tower.
Log comes on the Goblin Barrel. These pigs are chipping away, though. This match is so close. Moore goes for the rocket. Mugi needs to apply so much pressure right now.
Morton going in with the Dark Goblin. He wants that Elixir on defense.
It's on.
He's gonna come down. The Dark Goblin's on. 63 HP.
I don't think Log does enough.
He needs the guards.
Doesn't.
There's the Mighty Miner. Mighty Miner changes it up. And
there's the rocket. There's the rocket.
What an incredible match. But, you know, now let's get back to the real star of the story, the cannon. For the next couple of years, Cannon's stats stayed relatively consistent. Usage rates would dip and rise depending on the meta, but overall it remained a steady, healthy card. It was never overwhelmingly strong, but it was never weak either. Just a reliable option that continued to thrive in decks like Hog 2.6, which kept it alive in competitive and ladder play. Then came a major shift in June of 2023 with the introduction of card evolutions. This new mechanic brought special powered-up versions of cards, and it quickly began to reshape how players built their decks. In November of 2023, 6 new evolutions were teased to be released in the coming months, one of which was the Tesla. Now, the base Tesla wasn't particularly strong at the time, but its evolution was extremely powerful, giving it a significant edge over the other buildings. And in Clash Royale, simply having an evolution made a card more appealing. Players started using Tesla in many decks, not because the base card was better than Cannon, but because the evolved version added raw value and flexibility that Cannon couldn't offer. However, this didn't affect 2.6 Hog Cycle. That deck didn't need a new evolved building because it already used evolved skeletons and evolved Ice Spirit, both of which offered some great synergy and fast cycling. The Cannon, yet again, remained untouched, still fulfilling its irreplaceable role in the deck. While Tesla became more popular elsewhere, 2.6 stayed loyal to the building that had always worked. But Cannon wasn't just holding its place in Hog 2.6. It was quietly becoming a cornerstone of another top-tier deck, Royal Hogs with Archer Queen. In 2024, this deck exploded in popularity, thanks in part to Evolve Skeletons and Evolve Ice Spirit, which gave it insane cycling power and defensive value. And once again, Cannon proved irreplaceable. Its low-cost ground control and synergy with fast cycles made it the perfect fit. And in the 2024 Clash Royale World Championship, this exact Royal Hogs deck became one of the most used archetypes in the entire tournament. And now, we're gonna see it in action. First up, Guriko versus El Psyop. And then Muhammad Light versus El Psyop, a matchup that shows just how much pressure this deck can apply when piloted by one of the best in the world. And finally, we're ending with one of the most intense battles of all, Lucas versus Sub, a back-and-forth war with unreal decision-making. And in all 3 of these matches, Cannon is at the core of it all. Get ready, because what you're about to see is absolutely incredible. Enjoy.
But, you know, this is a tough match. This is a difficult matchup, and he really needs to do something to get these pigs to the tower.
A little bit of damage there, mostly courtesy of the Earthquake. Archer Queen at the bridge, getting some protection. And now just setting up Cannon. Archer Queen ability will help a lot, and look at that. Brilliant defense here. Will it be enough?
He's got the Ice Spirit, he's got the log to stop that Rain Rider charge. It's almost as if he's gonna get more damage, he needs another Cannon card or maybe even a P.E.K.K.A connection. And all of a sudden, Guriko is starting to inch towards that damage lead as he goes through this log just by good defense and Earthquake cycle.
And you see him set up Archer Queen in the back. We are in triple Elixir. This is where you do exactly what you're seeing. Archer Queen in the back, 3-card cycle, Earthquake, log, Skellies, or the Ice Spirit, back once more.
Roll, delivery on the left, double Cannon, tell defend, but look at the arrow zap,
Oh,
Queen everything
boy.
off the board. He has to roll delivery, he gets the Cannon down in time to stop the Rain Rider, just barely somehow, and now he's going for the push.
Pigs in, guards plus Royal Ghosts against, arrows to clear, and now El Psyop has to connect in the final seconds, or that's going to be game 1. Oh my word, the Cannon card connects! Rico absolutely throwing here. Can he cycle enough to get this one back? Arrows the opposite direction. 654, 758. El Psyop takes game number 1.
Difficult to deal with, especially when you don't have a solid tank in your deck.
EQ in early, in Muhammad Light maybe trying to figure out what's going to be the mathematics to get his damage in, and now we go aggressive. RG at the bridge, left-hand lane, switching sides. This one, though, getting handled by the Cannon and the Archer Queen. Guard does get a couple of stabs.
Monk, same lane as the Queen yet again, and here comes the split bigs I was talking about. You have to choose which side to fireball. Fireball on the right, guards on the left. Will Muhammad Light get a second Archer Queen ability? Yes, he has it available, but he's not going to use it. El Psyop with the Monk ability to prevent.
Lead now for Mohamed in sudden death overtime. 24-62, top right-hand side of your screen. 23-88 on the bottom. Evo, Ice Spirit plus Cannon to hold against the Royal Giant.
Biggs right away. I really like this pressure while defending, forcing the fireball defense, using the log as well. LCOP knows that this game is very close, and wow, and the Ice Spirit doesn't jump.
Was that an overspend by LCOP with the fireball and the log there? I know he wanted to mitigate all the damage, but you know, instead of a positive trade, now he had a negative one.
Yeah, and the Queen's still alive. He has to log, and here comes the Pigs. And watch out for those Evo skeletons. He has to fireball, but look at the damage to the right-hand side.
And you saw he had to wait to make sure that the Evo skeletons and the two Pigs were together. Pressure from Mohamed Light now giving him the lead with 1:08 left. Keep in mind that while LCOP does have fireball and log, there's almost no way they're going into a spell cycle situation with his defensive needs.
And here comes the Pigs right away with the pre-log plus pre-quake on the guards,
wow.
allowing for so much damage to come through with these piggies. LCOP needs to bounce back with a double Royal Giant push if he's going to make this comeback.
Does he double up on that left-hand side, or does he go left-right here? We see the guards and the fishermen on the right-hand side. Evo Skellies, Ice Wiz plus log to clear. Evo RG still fairly healthy. Second Royal Giant right behind it. He needs to break through here. Can he do it?
The Monk is deflecting the Queen and the Cannon. The Royal Giant is walking through. Log dropping down. Ice Spirit does get taken out. Evo Ice Spirit jumps. No,
what a
Evo
log.
Ice Spirit jumps, and that Royal Giant is locked down.
That Cannon, the cycle of Mohamed Light. Picture perfect. Can he hold on? 11 more seconds. This is looking good for Mohamed Light. Cannon to hold. 6 seconds left. Fireball trying to clear. Royal Giant stuck by the Cannon, and Mohamed Light wins game number 1.
Is going to survive here. Sub is definitely going to go for some piggies soon to make use of that 3-card cycle. Maybe a pre-earthquake on the Cannon as well. There's the pre-earthquake, but Lucas knows that the pre-earthquake is coming. He predicts the prediction, if you will, and stop the Pigs. But look at the Queen left side.
Archer Queen getting shot after shot, getting the tower down to 20-36. Both towers for Lucas taking a beating, but I mean, it's still a very close game. Dark Goblin outside of the range of the Crown Tower, so going to be able to take out the Cannon entirely. And Archer Queen at the bridge, I mean, this is going to put in a ton of work right here.
Delivery on one side, log on the other. Evo Skellies get taken out immediately, and the Goblin Sign ability is doing massive damage for Lucas.
Right there, completely flipping the energy of the arena, getting the tower down to 1502. Ice Spirit plus Earthquake. And I mean, Sub is recognizing my opponent has no spell, has no big spell whatsoever. If I defend cleanly, I should be able to win. It's just going to be whether or not Lucas is going to force out errors from his opponent.
This is fascinating. Full defense, no pigs at all. Can he have the perfect defense? That is the question. Will he be able to stop the bait spam? Evo Goblin Barrel inbound. Skelly's one side, log the other. Decent damage defense.
And right there, Princess plus Dark Goblin. Dark Goblin does stay alive, not hit by the Royal Delivery. Log on defense from Sub. Any of the Goblin gang picked up. 2 of the Spirit Goblins still alive. Princess at the bridge. 14 seconds left. Lucas needs to figure out something quickly.
Dark Goblin at the bridge. Goblin Barrel's here. Log
look at this, look at the Dark Goblin.
The Dark Goblin versus Earthquake.
11:28, 12:12. The Dark Goblin did it! Earthquake coming in! Left in! Lucas gets it!
An absolutely insane match between Lucas and Sub. Phenomenal gameplay from both sides, but don't go anywhere because the story of the Cannon, well, it is far from over. In November of 2024, Clash Royale dropped 2 new evolutions, Musketeer and Cannon. The Musketeer, honestly, a little disappointing, but the evolved Cannon, even if it didn't look like much at first, turned out to be a serious game changer. At its core, Evolved Cannon played exactly like the regular Cannon. Same stats, same cost, same role. But here's what made it different. When you deployed it, it would immediately unleash a barrage of explosions in front of it. And these weren't some weak little firecrackers. This barrage could instantly delete swarms, take out firecrackers, dark goblins, minions, and just about anything fragile. It even had knockback, letting it stall pushes, reset charges like Battle Ram or Ram Rider, and then buy more time for your defenses. The wildest part? If you played it in the opponent's half after taking a tower, one of these explosions could even hit the other Princess Tower, doing 320 damage at tournament standard.
Oh my
my god, it does!
Maybe that was the teaser image they posted.
It was the cannon the whole time, not the musketeer.
And that is more than a fireball. It didn't take long for that to be nerfed, obviously. The devs had clearly overlooked just how crazy that interaction was. Still, even after the nerf to its tower damage, it remained a powerful evolution. And then in January of 2025, it got buffed. The barrage damage was increased by 10%, making it even more insane. Even against Royal Hogs, one of the most annoying swarm win conditions, the evolved cannon was a perfect counter. If placed right, its barrage could weaken or even wipe out several hogs before they reached your tower, giving your Ice Spirit or skeletons a chance to finish the job. It was far more forgiving than relying on the regular cannon alone. When facing Balloon, cannon usually struggled since it only targets ground units, but the barrage's splash damage made it a better option due to both the damage as well as the knockback. This gave players more options and breathing room in defense. In January of 2025, the barrage damage got a 10% buff, pushing the cannon even further into dominance. That extra damage actually helped fully eliminate units that might have survived before, making it extremely versatile. The cannon stopped being just a niche, cheap distraction used just in Hog 2.6. It became a multi-purpose answer to swarms, bridge spam, and support units, while keeping its core. But for most other decks, the evolved cannon became a staple. Its ability to control ground, counter swarms, tall pushes, and by time, breathe new life into the meta. Cannon didn't need to evolve to stay relevant, but when it did, it went absolutely nuts. And don't just take my word for it. What you're about to see here are some of the craziest cannon plays out there. Clips I found on Reddit, YouTube, and just showing how broken, clutch, and satisfying this card can be in real matches. So let's roll them.
Okay, I can Evo Spirit, maybe, yep. Evo Cannon here. I go for the Skellies to keep this alive for longer, the Olivia to block, and then I can go for the Ice Spirit to reset and my Queen lives.
Oh my god.
Now I think I could go for the Piggies at the bridge here. Maybe not because he has Valkyrie, but nah, I think it's worth it anyways. I'm gonna Piggies here. I'm gonna log for the Valk, Evo, because he has the Evo, then I ability immediately just to try to damage that. Nice, and you see my log reset the attack, so then the Piggies kept running instead of getting knocked back, and I won.
You're the GOAT. You're the GOAT. No. You're actually the GOAT. You are the GOAT!
Bro, yeah, nice defense! The Valkyrie with the log.
Really think that I'm going to be able to defend at some point. Maybe once he gets to the Evo Knight. Let's Evo Cannon here. Pop the ability just to keep the Mighty Miner alive, then log. Beautiful. Goblins here to pull this over. One Princess Shot plus log plus Evo Cannon Bomb does actually take out a little Prince, guys. That interaction sounds crazy, but it's very important. Let's go for the Evo Barrel right now.
Go for the cannon here, unfortunately. Oh, we do knock the balloon back. That was actually kind of clutch right there. Guys, that was actually a quite clutch Evo cannon, I gotta say. And Evo Ice Spirit should come in clutch as well, certainly. Wow, what a defense right there. This guy's saying good game now.
I have Evo Cannon ready. He might try to Firecracker the bridge here on top of my Skelly, so I'm going to block it. Wait, I can Evo Cannon to take out his bats.
Nice, man.
Log here, Skelly's to push that one in. Oh, and the going gang. Nice.
That was huge. That was fucking huge, dude.
Ability here. Now everything's going to walk in and die. Oh, no way that walked away like that. It's okay. Wait, die. Come on. Nice.
I think I like this situation. Ooh, that's an interesting E-Wiz. Very nice Evo Cannon. Oh my gosh, the Evo Cannon value is crazy. Ability. Oh no, this is bad. Because I don't have much for this Ram. Actually, maybe it will just die here. Yeah, it looks like it's gonna die.
Here, all good. You can Evo Cannon as well for the wall breakers. That should hit the Magic Archer too. Beautiful. I'm happy with that.
That's honestly not even like a good player usually. Wait, I should have Evo Cannon. Did I sell? Wait a minute, we have this? Evo Cannon might have saved my life. Evo Cannon saved my life! No! Evo Cannon saved my life.
The cannon quickly grew into an incredibly strong card and started appearing in nearly every archetype. Its barrage wasn't just a flashy gimmick. It was surprisingly easy to use effectively, even for players who weren't aiming for perfection. Many times you'd see the barrage unintentionally wipe out an entire firecracker or take away a huge chunk of an Electro Wizard's health simply because the explosions covered such a wide area. This kind of splash damage made it a formidable answer to swarms and pesky support units that would normally give the cannon trouble. The widespread power meant the cannon's barrage had a major impact on games, shifting the meta and forcing opponents to adapt. In the 2025 World Championship, leading up to the World Finals, Evolved Cannon showed up in several high-level matches, and it absolutely delivered. You're about to see just how satisfying this card can be in competitive play. From perfect splash timing to clutch defensive holds, these next few games are packed with clean mechanics, smart interactions, and devastating value from the Evo Cannon. Trust me, if you love calculated chaos, you're gonna love these matches, so let's jump right in.
See the spears. Spears massive damage.
Little Prince gets damage in as well. 2276 to 1072 and 1224. We've only seen, I think, one Royal Giant come out. Here's another Royal Giant coming down. We still don't know what that last card is here for Samuel. He is now getting a great monk ability up front. Guards to catch the Suspicious Bush on the opposite side.
Wow.
Nothing really here for that Royal Giant.
Great defense there. Evo Cannon dropping on defense. Royal Giant inbound. Spear God's breaking through. Snowball pushes the Ghost away. And the Goblins are getting damaged somehow. I don't know how, but they are.
This is somehow working. Here's the final last-ditch effort. Monk is actually in front of the Witch, which is trouble here for Samuel. Does get the RG in.
Oh my gosh, that was the best Snowball I've ever seen. It pushed back the Monk before the ability could drop. It slowed down and took out the Witch, and there's no damage through. Sosa winning with by far the weirdest deck I've ever seen in Clash Royale League.
And you can see Sosa, look at him. He's talking his trash. He's feeling hyped up. I'm excited to see this game number 3, man.
That hog hit, but the fire gets chipped. I can't believe that Adriel ends up winning this game with only Ruben ends up winning this game with only 20 seconds.
Wow, look at that value from the Evo Cannon. Cleans up the units on the left-hand side, takes out the Evo Firecracker, cleans up the units on the bridge on the right-hand side. I mean, pushes back the hog and puts damage on it. I mean, yeah, wow. Snowball comes in.
Oh my gosh. And then the last second Goblin hit after predicting the Fire Spear with the Snowball.
He's getting that Muhammad-like grimace that you see when things just aren't quite going his way. He's taking more damage than he wants, especially with a deck like this, where your win condition is the Miner and kind of the Boss Bandit, but against someone like Pedro, that Boss Bandit feels like a lot less of a win condition than it would normally.
Here we see the cannon place one tile up in the opposite lane to prevent Fireball from hitting the tower and the cannon at the same time. It's a solid defense. Hunter won't get a shot, but Mo, this is not the situation Mo likes to be in. He doesn't like to be down damage in overtime. He likes to be up damage with really solid defense. And he's going to have to find some way to break through here.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point that you make about Mo. He usually does come out to the lead earlier in the matchup and then hold on and, you know, get in a spell at the end. Like you said, he usually just spends a lot of that time defending, but this is not the case you want to be in, and this is also not the situation Muhammad Light likes to play from. A little bit late on the log there. Knew the E-Spirit was going to come for the bats. E-Spirit gets there just in time, and now that Evo RG will get a shot, and it does. 1566, 2175. A lot of damage coming in here on the left that Mo has to sacrifice.
And the Hunter's going to get another hit too. Now the left side is the most HP done. He's going to go for the Boss Man ability right away, but the Fisherman's ready for the Miner. Fireball onto the Fisherman to try to break through, but it's just not enough. And here comes a Royal Giant from Pedro immediately.
And I was just going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Juice, but I'm pretty sure this is also going to be a spot where Pedro wants to switch lanes, not only because it's the weaker tower, but it's the weaker tower in the same lane that that Mo's trying to work on. And so the spell value, the Hunter value, the counter push value is all so much better.
Fireball inbound, 16 seconds left in the clock. Evo Hunter's in cycle blocking the lane. The Monk is getting more chip damage, as well as with 3-card cycles, Pedro's going to cycle back to his Fireball quicker. He also catches the Miner of the Skeletons. Fireball from Mo, Fireball from Pedro, and Pedro taking down the world champion.
The Boss Bandit, and no big spells on the board.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that the Boss Bandit is a little bit better versus the Archer Queen, just because if the Archer Queen does play the ability, you can go for the boss man ability to kind of let the Archer Queen use all of its arrows, if you will, and then at that point, hopefully you're able to win the champion bridge battle. Looks like Sosa's going to win this one, though, but he's also... Ooh. Wow, that was just a nice Firecracker play to really break through there.
And Piggies come down the lane. Late Ice Spirit and Skellies. Good Earthquake there from Sosa, so a log has to come out. Still gets a couple nibbles on the tower. 2183, 2205. Sosa in the lead by just a hair.
Yeah, and you can really see already, like that Hog Rider, it didn't make it to the tower just barely, especially with that King activated. But these Royal Hogs, I mean, they're going to be constantly applying pressure with the Earthquake. He doesn't get the Earthquake down right now for some reason, but it's just a little bit more difficult to stop the consistency of the Hogs.
Nice adjustment there from both these guys on their sends. Pedro sending up a high Ice Spirit to catch the Ice Spirit that kind of did him dirty last push, and that Evo Cannon, such a great get-out-of-jail-free card.
Yeah, the other big get-out-of-jail-free card here is the Ice Spirit. Using her Evil Ice Spirit effectively versus the Royal Hogs and the Hog Rider is just so important.
And Firecracker end up able to push those Piggies towards that cannon in the middle. No damage in with those skeletons coming down. 2024 to 1887 as the Earthquake cycle comes in, and I'm sure all you Hog players are very familiar with Hog EQ and Royal Hog EQ, similar matchups or mirror matchups, and a lot of that becomes just a couple Hog hits through and a lot of Earthquake cycling. So we'll see if Sosa can kind of get this lead back, or if Pedro's going to continue to hold the line with just defense and EQs.
Wow. And Pedro actually loses his boss bandit here. Something that's very important at the very end of a match like this is keeping your champion alive to keep your 3-card cycle activated so that you can play more Earthquakes and more Hog Riders. But the Hog gets a hit!
Wow!
That's a game-winning connection from the Hog. That's absolutely clutch.
Yeah, that's huge. And you can see it right there on Sosa's face, kind of a big sigh. You see kind of the grimace on his face. He knows, just as I was kind of discussing, when you've played this matchup a bunch, I mean, there's still a chance. There's always a chance that something can happen, but Pedro knows his lead is good, so he's not going to do anything too crazy, put himself in a dangerous situation. He's going to try to send in the Hog for a little bit of, defensive elixir from Sosa, but as you can see here, guys, he's just going to lock down that defense, sends in the Hog late. That's going to do it. GG, well played. Sosa's run comes to an end. He was able to make it through to day 2. He can tower, but remember, no big spells in hand for Tourist. We're talking a couple arrows, few rages, and that's a lot of work to get done late game. So see how this unfolds.
Evo Cannon in the middle, Evo Knight inside for the boss bandit. He has to make sure this Lumberjack doesn't reach his tower, and the Hog Rider is going to get a hit, maybe 2.
Wow!
No,
okay.
Just 1.
Yeah.
Very close. All of a sudden, we got a game, Andrew.
Yeah, this is insane. I mean, Ruben really proving what exactly you were talking about, which is that he can really do it against anyone, anytime with the comebacks.
Oh my gosh.
It's getting close. Bomber? No.
Ooh.
Wow.
Hog inbound? What does Tourist have for defense? He's got a boss minion dashing and a mega minion. The Hog does get the hit. Earthquake doesn't do it. He needs 2 to win.
Yeah. And so you see the aggressive giant at the bridge, Queen in the opposite lane, knowing that boss bandit will take the tower, making him spend a lot. Not going to be able to get 2 Earthquakes out right now. Needs a perfect defense first, and then the first Earthquake cycled. That's really nice.
Some incredible gameplay, if I may say so myself. The cannon was putting in so much work, completely turning games around with just one perfect placement. However, its sheer effectiveness, and how easy it was to get value from, started raising some serious balance concerns. To address this, the devs decided to reduce the barrage's radius from 2.5 tiles down to 2. And while this seems like a small adjustment, it was actually quite significant since it affected all 6 explosions triggered by the cannon's deployment. Reducing the radius meant fewer units would be caught in every blast, especially on the edges, which brought the cannon's power back into a more balanced range. This nerf helped prevent the card from dominating every match while still preserving its unique versatility and strength. It was a careful move that maintained the cannon's place as a powerful, multi-purpose defensive and offensive tool without letting it become oppressive. Even after the barrage radius was reduced, the evolved cannon still feels incredibly strong. The combination of splash damage damage, multiple explosions, and knockback creates a powerful tool that can dismantle swarms, reset charges, and stall pushes with ease. That kind of impact can feel overwhelming for opponents and hard to play around. Because of this, I think the cannon could really benefit from another nerf to kind of bring it back to a more balanced level. Two changes in particular could help. First, I kind of suggest they remove the knockback effect from the explosions. Right now, that knockback lets the cannon stall enemy troops, reset charges from units like Battle Ram or Ram Rider, and generally just buy extra time for your defenses. And while it is powerful, it can feel a little unfair and too sticky in defensive scenarios. Removing the knockback would still keep the barrage useful for damage, but make it less frustrating to deal with, requiring more skill and better positioning from players. Or what they could do is reduce the number of explosions from 6 down to 4. Currently, the 6 explosions spread out to provide huge coverage and little to no way to avoid it, making the cannon incredibly versatile against swarms and multiple threats. Cutting this down to 4 would lower its overall damage output and reduce how long it can control the battlefield, making it way easier for opponents to counter and recover. Together, those changes might help keep the evolved cannon's identity as a multi-hit splash damage defensive building, but limit how much control it exerts over the game. It would no longer feel like a guaranteed swarm clearer and stun lock tool, allowing for a more balanced and varied gameplay. In my opinion, these adjustments would keep the cannon viable and fun without letting it dominate the meta too heavily. The card deserves to be strong, but not impossible to challenge, and right now, it's tipping just a bit too far in that direction. So while the cannon has come a long way from a simple 3 elixir building to a meta-defining powerhouse, its journey shows just how far Clash Royale has evolved, and why smart balance changes matter more than ever. But trust me, this story is nothing. If you thought the cannon was wild, wait until you see the cards that straight up broke Clash Royale. Click here to watch the full list, and I bet you won't guess what made it to number 1. I'll see you there.